It's the True Penny Show
with your host, James Truepenny.
Hello and welcome to the True Penny Show. My name's James Truepenny and this is my show. For those of you who have not listened in a while, you may notice that I have taken a much slower and more deliberate approach to our introductions because we've discovered that if I speak too loudly, it knocks the other person off the call. So we're not doing that anymore. It's now Radio 2 voice only. You know, I'm old and tired and it seems to reflect my look on life. In the meantime, today we are going to return to the beginner's guide to Today we're going to return to the beginner's guide to Japanese wrestling in Japan. And joining me at her suggestion is Ruth, because she has a plan. That plan involves Osaka Pro, as it usually does. How are you, Mom?
I am, I was going to do the really British thing of saying I am completely fine. But I'm not completely fine. Things are a little bit difficult and a little bit complicated at the moment. But that is exactly why I want to talk about this show, because this is one that I actually put on when things are not fine. This is my big hit of emotion, moment in time type show that gives you a bit of perspective on the world and gives you all those big feelings that wrestling is all about. So I think this is a really good thing to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing is, like, I think we probably all have comfort watch wrestling, but I think that there are moments that we watch that we should revisit because of the reasons you said. They give us perspective on everything. It's like films, and there are certain films that mark certain passages in my life that I don't watch very much anymore, possibly because I watch them far too much at the time. Clerks would be the prime example of that. As someone who grew up working in retail and it was such a part of my life for a very long period of time, I haven't watched it in about 5-10 years because I watched it too much. And I can quote you all of the words in order from the beginning to the end. But I think wrestling also hits us in the same way. I'm sure it's the same for other sports and for other forms of entertainment too. There are football matches, I'm sure, that certain people watch back again just to make them understand where they are in their perspective in life. And I think that's really interesting. It's maybe worth an episode at some point. So why is this one so important to you then?
Okay, so it's really interesting actually watching it for this show because it's the first time I've tried to, I suppose, review this thing that I watch. I was quite interested actually because I went through and I was like, you know what? I don't think any of these matches are the best example from any of these wrestlers. I don't think any of these are the best example for the championship. I don't think it's the best example of Osaka. However, it is a real moment in time for the company. It was a really big deal in terms of where they were. And it's also the start of a really big thing. So my specialist subject in wrestling is Momo no Seishun tag. Atsushi Kotoge and Daisuke Harada. They are, if I had comfort wrestlers, I have 3 comfort wrestlers. They are 2 of them. They are my special subject. They are the guys that I know all the stupid little stories about. And this was a real kind of there's this moment in Osaka where actually the young guys were starting to step up. So there's stuff that happens on the show that is about them. But actually I have a little bit of a spiel about this show that I'm just gonna
feel free to spiel.
Oh, let's go for it. Okay. So obviously last time we were here we looked at the J Cup, which was 2004. And so we're fast forwarding 4 years. A lot of things have changed for Osaka Pro, but a lot of things are still the same. So you get Marufuji back in this show. You get the guys, Tiger's Mask and Billy Ken Kid, who were in a tag team in the last one. They're coming on this show. Shinzaki, I think, is back in this show. So there's a lot of kind of repeated things. But actually this moment, 2008, was a really big period of change for Osaka Pro. So I'm guessing most people listening to this might know a little bit about the company, but if not, your quick history is that it was founded by Super Delfin in 1999, Super Delfin being one of the 3 great Japanese luchadors. It came out of a split with Michinoku Pro, and it was founded around the idea of having regional pro wrestling based in Osaka, bit of a Osaka character, having masked characters and really appealing to kind of families and children. So they're 7 or 8 years into their history at this point, but founder Super Delphin in kind of August 2007 basically turned around and said, actually, I'm taking a step back from this company. We've taken it so far, and I'm taking a step back, and I'm going to found a new company. I'm going to found Okinawa Pro Wrestling around the same principle of we need Riesling Pro Wrestling. It was something that was always a dream of his. So he takes a step back. He doesn't leave. It's actually a very positive thing. It's founded under the same umbrella, same company as Osaka Pro, so it's not a split. But he takes a step out of the spotlight, and you get Yuji Sakagami, who's a founder, a financial backer, becomes the kind of chairman and director of Osaka Pro. And this show, this Osaka Hurricane show, is the first big show under his directorship. So that's a big deal because it's the first one that's not under the founder. The second thing that also happened around the same time is that Osaka Pro lost its base. So they had a permanent home in a place called Festival Gate. Festival Gate was a amusement park in Osaka.
Yes.
They kind of had constant footfall of families, of children to walk in the door and enjoy the wrestling. So it was a great kind of money-making way of being able to run wrestling, but it also meant you could run after school shows, after school kind of classes around wrestling. You could have people walk in. You could run shows of 30 to 60 people and still be, turning over money in a way that worked for the wrestlers. They lost that venue because Festival Gate basically went bankrupt in 2007, and they had to move out. And they moved out of Delphin Arena Festival Gate to Delphin Arena Donbori. Delphin does like to name things after himself. It does him quite well in Delphin. Donbori is an entertainment district. It's kind of the area that they are known for now, but it's not the same. You don't have school kids coming there after school to play games. It's not the same kind of footfall, and they didn't necessarily know if they were going to be able financially to have the same kind of security that they had at Festival Gate. They didn't know it was going to bring them the same kind of thing. And actually it turned out that it did, but it was this kind of not being quite sure where they were going to be as a company during this period. However, really good period for the talent, because you have guys like Billy Ken Kidd, guys like Tiger's Mask, Tsubasa, Hub as well, who some of which are homegrown guys, some of which kind of have come but have made most of their career in Osaka Pro. They are starting to take a lead. So you don't actually need your Delphins as much. You don't need your outsiders as much in this period. They are starting to be what becomes Osaka Pro. But also you get the young guys, Katoge, Harada, all the guys we see in the opener of this show. They start to also get into the kind of main event picture around this time as well. So it's actually a growth period, but they didn't necessarily know it at the time. There was a little bit of uncertainty. But part of the reason I suggested this show is because from the first camera angle, which kind of zooms over the crowd into the ring in the center, you are looking at a crowd of nearly 7,000 people.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize what a big deal Osaka Pro actually has been for Japanese wrestling. And I think a show like this really demonstrates, actually, this wasn't just some tiny regional company. This was a company that was really having an impact on the kind of Japanese wrestling scene as a whole, and what good wrestling looked like. Their wrestlers were getting known and getting a lot of exposure outside of the company. They were somewhere that people wanted to be and wanted to come. And it was a really exciting kind of company and kind of really exciting time for them. So that's my kind of spiel in the background. You went into this cold, though.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a lot of knowledge of this era just because I don't have a lot of knowledge of this era basically between 2005 and between 2011 in any wrestling company in Japan, largely because there was less of it and it was less well recorded and distributed. So like if you it was kind of the dark ages of when YouTube was still only 10-minute videos, so people weren't sticking stuff on YouTube. And so therefore you were kind of relying on the DVD companies to have it, and if like Rudo Reels or IDP didn't have it, you were kind of stuck. So there's a lot of stuff that was difficult to access that I don't really know about in this period. Like my knowledge is pretty good, but until about 2005, and then everything kind of like drops off, and then picks up again in about 2013 once the Japanese recession is over and tech's caught up, so you can run a show with two Sony A350s. Pardon me. You can run a show with two Sony A350s and a decent microphone, and put it out on a streaming service, and then you get the growth of companies like iStriven, and then Stardom do the same thing, but Stardom kind of a bit more traditional, so they do TV, and then Sendai Girls are copying what iStriven do, and all of a sudden the Japanese indies explode again because you can see stuff basically because access has suddenly become a lot easier. So that's when the wave of, to be honest with you, I think we could probably write a book on like the impact that streaming and YouTube has done on Japanese wrestling from 2013 to around about 2019, because that was the massive growth period of this current generation. But prior to that, there's this dark age of the tech's there, but it's no longer accessible because the TV companies aren't doing everything like they used to. They would do New Japan, they would do All Japan, they would do Noah, they would do Oz Academy, and that's about it. So the weekly TV wrestling highlight show would cycle between those companies, and occasionally get a Freedom show. But you can't stick Freedoms on TV too often because blood guts. So yeah, I was going into this cold, and specifically, I find it interesting in the reverse side of he's in Noah now, and you see a lot of that is because actually this period is really important to Japanese growth because you can see them developing directly in front of your eyes. The gestation period for Japanese wrestling, whatever company you're in. We was talking about this the other week about how Japanese wrestling companies produce incredible teenagers. But really, there's a gestation period to get them to that main event status and confirm them as main eventers, and some of them won't make it, or at least having longer careers. And you can see these guys now they've all had longer careers. So I find that interesting, fascinating, that the success rate of these wrestlers is exceptionally high for the depth of the roster they had at the time in what's generally considered a downtime for Japanese wrestling. But I think it's probably because you just didn't see it as much and it's not as accessible. Sorry, I went on a rant then.
No, I mean, the reason we have this is because, this was on Samurai TV, and Osaka Pro got their kind of hour-long weekend show. And that's the only reason we have a decent amount now going back. I mean, I wasn't aware of these guys until, some of the partnerships in America, they had a partnership with Shikara later on. And that's if they hadn't also then gone into Noah, I would not have followed them kind of back through the archives. There are people still now selling VHSs of Osaka Pro shows because it is really hard to get hold of them, even in Japan, because of the complicatedness of TV contracts and who owns what. So it is a really interesting one, I think.
I think so. I think it's kind of interesting. It's kind of also Japanese wrestling is a culture of stuff that's built to last, in the sense of I'm not saying that all the total forms of wrestling is throwaway, but it's supposed to be disposable, right? You're not Rip Rogers used to complain about the WWE streaming service because he said, who wants to pay money for old wrestling? That's madness. It was never designed to be like that. It was designed to be consumable, and it's a soap opera. It's not supposed to be a film. And we see wrestling differently now. And I think the Japanese stuff is kind of it's built in a specific way, and the shows are meant to be like that. And you're supposed to watch them as a set. You're not supposed to watch them individually because there's context to the whole show, which is one of those subtleties that a lot of Western fans miss out on, is because they watch the cool stuff, the stuff that's recommended, and that's fine. But they don't. Some of the things we see it a lot with establishing kind of spots that you see in earlier matches that pay off later in the card. There's not so much on this particular show, but unless you watch the opening 3 matches, you don't get what's going to happen in the semi-main event because it just seems odd. Now, context, But wrestling shows are meant to be all packages from beginning to end. They're not booking it. They're booking for now, they're booking for yesterday, they're booking for tomorrow, and they're booking for in 15 minutes time. And that's kind of like why it's important to watch things in context. So yes, there's loads of matches you can do as pullouts, but generally speaking, if you want to understand the company and where it's at that particular time period, watch its biggest show of the year from beginning to end, and you'll understand everything that's going on. And it is like this show's a Osaka Prefectural Gymnasium, 6,816 people in attendance. New Japan can't get more than 5,000 in there at the minute. And they've tried a lot. You know, this to show you how big Osaka Pro was at the time and is now.
Even at the time, like, I mean, they were likening it to New Japan in its heyday. You know, even in 2008, they were talking about a New Japan heyday, and like obviously things have gotten a lot more complicated since then. So it's a really interesting one. It got so much attention, I think, even at the time. So you know, Sakagami did a good job, I think, of his first show in terms of getting that many people in, and certainly he got a good amount of coverage for this. So the fact that it was on Samurai TV, the fact that, I mean, Murata's on commentary, this was a big show. It made it a big show.
And yeah, there's a couple of things I want to just go back on what you're saying. And like, well, first of all, you can see by the amount of photographers who were there for the main event. Like that's like, you know, all Japan in the 90s level number of photographers with ringside waiting, shooting that match. And the other thing is like Okinawa Pro as well with Delphine. Does make me smile because it is like the Japanese wrestling industry took 50 years to figure out how a territory system would work. You know, like every other country in every other wrestling market in the world had territory systems. Even the UK had a territory system. You know, Reslo and Green will be doing the North, and Dale Martin does London, and that's, you know, that's how they did joint promotions, hence joint promotions. But you know, Japan was like, no, we're all right with the one company until he dies, and then everything's going to break up, and we're going to become regional eventually. That makes me smile. It's just like reverse engineering a territory system.
It's so interesting because they got it. I don't think it was Daphne. I think it might have been Sasuke who talked about it, but they got the idea of kind of local wrestling from Mexico, from the time in Mexico, and saying, you know, actually this is really rooted in the community, and we want wrestling that's rooted in the community, because you started to get, you know, indie wrestling in Japan, but it was still a Tokyo thing. And then you get this kind of regional thing, and then Delphine goes off to Osaka because he's a big hero in Osaka, and Osaka Pro still is. I think it's, talking about this with Zoe the other day, actually, it's like it is the most regional of regional wrestling companies that you can see on TV, because it absolutely, it has local jokes, it has local comedians, like it has they do occasional like local promotions in shops where they've got local comedians and Osaka Pro wrestlers together. This kind of stuff you wouldn't even bother buying outside of Osaka because it would be completely pointless and you wouldn't get the joke. But they do so many things that are like that, and Okinawa Pro, I guess, was very much the same at the time. But yeah, it's now in Osaka you've got like 5 to 7 wrestling companies at least, and Delphine is probably on his 5th, I think, now. I think he's on his 5th. So he wasn't yet known as a founder.
No, I mean, it's a precursor to things like Sendai Girls, which obviously, like, you know, make us that more always like, I'm off somewhere different. Like, why go to a crowded market? Because every other Joshi company is based in, well, they're either based in Osaka from the Yokohama because of like the 80s and 90s and how big Joshi was in Yokohama, or they're based in Tokyo. So let's go do something different.
Yeah.
So and it's incredibly sensible, especially when you know, that recession that happened in 2005 took a long time to recover from. And when there's no money about, you're gonna go try to do different things that aren't the same. And I think that's really important. Like, limitations of cash in any art form, what drives it, and whether you have limited cash but still want to produce your art, or whether you have loads of cash and can do what you like, is going to tell you and inform the product you're going to make, and also give you access issues or access developments. And I think this is really important to understand.
Yeah, it's kind of what makes it fascinating. I don't know if you can tell that my first degree was history, because it's like, it's this kind of stuff, all that context around this, like, just one performance. And I get, people want to jump in and enjoy a match, or they just want to enjoy a wrestler. Absolutely. There's no, well, there might be some wrong ways to enjoy wrestling, but there are many, 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 many right ways. It's just that for me, I love looking at this as this kind of moment in time, this example of all of this stuff. So when you talk about photographers, they build this, and very successfully actually in terms of their promotion, as the biggest mask versus mask match between Japanese wrestlers on Japanese soil that had ever happened. So this was intended, they were specifically putting it out there as a moment in history. And they're not wrong. I mean, arguably there were, even in Delphin's history, Delphin had a match against Sato, became Dick Togo, who was, very big. You'd already had Dragon Kid versus Darkness Dragon. There are other mask versus mask examples, but in companies that were a lot more, I think, explicitly lucha oriented than maybe Osaka was. Although, it had a good number of luchadors. And less, the stakes for this one were really high. Osaka Pro is built around masked wrestlers. It's part of his appeal. Masked wrestlers and kids are a great combination. You make a lot of money this way. It is a really easy way to set up a character if your clientele is going to be walk past, or you're only got them for an hour on a Saturday TV show. Like, it was core to them, and the fact that one person was going to walk out of this without effectively their identity, which was a huge selling point in Osaka Pro, it was such a big deal, and is such a big deal. So I think in some ways it does actually stand up as this like biggest mask versus mask because of the stakes.
I think, we have a big conversation in general in wrestling, like about bet matches, specifically hair versus hair matches, obviously because of MJF's hair match with Darby Allin that didn't end up with Darby Allin losing the title, and therefore MJF kept his hair. Presumably Darby Allin did not need to shave his hair. His hair is quite short and it would not make much difference. That's my favorite hair versus hair match, which was Teddy Long versus Precious Paul Ellering. So a balding guy versus a guy with a shaved head. I'm gonna have a hair versus hair match. God bless you, WCW. The gems you put forward into the world. And of course, Teddy couldn't wrestle either, so it was a boxing match. Anyway, if you want to go see it, it's on, I think it's on Wrestle 190. It's dreadful. It really is. There's also like, it was kind of odd because the Road Warriors had left to go to WWE at the time, so Paul Ellering wasn't going with them, so he was just kind of there. And Teddy Long was managing Doom, so obviously it come out of the Road Warriors versus Doom feud, and then it's just these two middle-aged guys trying to box one another in a hair versus hair match, and the crowd are like, "Hey, thanks for coming. Appreciate your effort." Hey.
Did anyone actually shave the unnecessary shaving experience?
Teddy got his, as you'd expect, when Teddy was the heel, he got his threads at the back trimmed off. Paul was fairly liberal with the razor blade. It was like a electric razor, so he didn't he was kind. I've seen much worse efforts. The ideal thing for a hair versus hair match is like sweaty men being shaved, their head shaved, isn't it? That's the ideal time to have a haircut.
Yeah. It's so dramatic. It's one of the things I love about Dragon Gate. Actually, they recently had somebody in their cage match who had to put up somebody else's hair because he didn't have enough.
Sure, they were well happy about that. I've got this idea for a hair versus, but he's bald. Yeah.
Didn't about it.
Yes, but you're not. No, hey. Yeah. About matches in general, I think the general discourse was, no one takes them seriously, and it's like, no one in America takes them seriously, and that's because of the diminishing returns. Because like everything else, if you use it too often, it becomes less important. So And it all depends on how you build your universe. That's as well as Osaka Pro, like you said, is because it's so kid friendly, because it's so character led, and this becomes the high stakes thing. And that's really important, as much as it is in Lucha Libre, and as much as it is in other forms of wrestling. One of the biggest kayfabe storylines ever to come out of British wrestling was Kendo Nagasaki demasking in the early 1980s, which was arguably a thing he should not have done, because he kind of went into semi-retirement and then came back later as masked Kendo Nagasaki again, which is a bit weird because everyone knew what he looked like. So what can you do? But it was part of the package. It was on ITV, and he had a bunch of Kendo artists with him and dissolved his mask in a sink, and it was like a bit weird. But there you go. Anywho, yeah. Shall we go forward with our opening match? You can find this on Archive, by the way. What's the name of the website? I can never remember.
Oh, hang on. We might have to put some link. So, yeah, it's on the Internet Archive. There is a Osaka Pro story compilation, which has all the TV shows and the videos from there. But yeah, if you're not sure, hit me up. I will share all Osaka Pro things, current and previous.
I will stick a link in as accurate as a link as you can get into when we put this podcast out. But yeah, you should just go in general. I had a lovely time flicking around it last night. I found the MASH books, which were a part of my youth, because I wanted to. There was a specific quote of Hawkeye Pierce's that I wanted to use in a Blue Sky post, and I managed to find it. It's very useful.
It's wonderful. It is so good for moments of your childhood you never thought you'd see again.
Exactly. So we are talking about Osaka Pro, Osaka Hurricane 2008. This happened on the 11th of February. And as we said, it was Osaka Prefectural Gymnasium, 6,816 in attendance. They were rammed in there. They really were. No barriers at Osaka Pro, so they were right up close to the ring. There was enough room. And the opening match was Daisuke Harada and, I'm going to get this wrong, Taka Yakida, or maybe not. They defeated Robert Tanaka and Tadasuke. And if you're thinking, is it that Tadasuke? It is, in fact, yes, that Tadasuke. 8 minutes and 55 seconds. Tadasuke is an Osaka boy, which means he's one of his favorites. What did you think of this match? Well, I thought it was fun.
I thought it was fun. I think it's a pretty good example of a rookie match.
Yeah.
You know, about kind of rookies and that kind of quality of guys coming out of here. Like, this is the point where they had a dojo. So they actually, you know, had a training system, which Harada come out of, Takayakida come out of, Roberto Tanaka. And Tadasuke is a little bit complicated because he was in Torimon, but didn't manage to make the jump over to Dragon Gate when they changed because there wasn't enough room for him. But he came into the dojo. And, you know, so obviously made it in Osaka and now made it in No, which is wonderful.
Yes,
but
it all worked out in the end. But
it all worked out in the end. Long, complicated journey. But, you know, I think it's a great bit of nostalgia, like you say. Tadasuke's tights, these are not the worst tights he ever had in Osaka Pro. That would be the lime green ones that came immediately beforehand. But it is so interesting seeing a guy now who, you know, he's all swagger, references to American wrestling. He's a bad guy primarily. He had a great bad guy runs in Osaka. And he's really cute, adorable, like bright colored tights. Being a little baby. But all of these guys had debuted within 2 years of the show. So they were all still pretty young. But it's a nice example of the thing. Ultimately, Harada is going to win because Harada is the guy who is already getting attention outside of the company. More so than anybody else. So Kotoge also was getting attention, but Kotoge was getting attention and working other indie companies and maybe slightly bigger companies, but in similar size venues to what Osaka Pro ran anyway, of like, you know, 120, maybe 200 people. However, Harada had come back recently from fighting Minoru Suzuki. So he was in a slightly different league in terms of the types of things he was getting invited up to do. I think he had a New Japan thing as well that he was getting around this time. So people were noticing him, and so he was winning quite a bit. And poor Tadasuke, as essentially the baby of the group, was unfortunately gonna fall down there. Interestingly, two of the guys in here, Taka Akita and Roberto Tanaka, I feel so weird watching Roberto Tanaka because he is now a masked character called Ultimate Spider Jr. They and they just celebrated their 20th and 21st anniversary, and him and Taka Akita are a huge tag team in Osaka Pro now called Taco Spa. They have their own dance, but is that really weird thing of seeing a masked guy without his mask, even though it's no secret that this is the same guy. But I just always feel slightly uncomfortable being like, oh, I can't look at you because you're not supposed to be there.
Scandalous.
Yeah, scandalous.
Yes, that's the thing. It was like last year when Shida and yeah, because she's done it a lot this year. It's become a lot more normal. But I'm having a brain fade. Give me a second. Kosei Fujita suggested that he went into Best of Super Juniors barefoot to wrestle Kojima because he wanted a grappling match, and Kojima was like, "All right then," and they wrestled barefoot. And Christy said it was scandalous. There was so much skin on show. It was rude.
It's like when people take down their knee pads.
Yeah,
it's always a bit like knees,
just things we're not expecting. What's going on? It's like they're in the pants though. There isn't much more we can see of them. Like that's Anywho,
but I mean, then you had Hyo coming out in the Super Juniors.
Yeah, Hyo wearing as little as humanly possible, and in fact, negative clothing. I feel
he's very good at that.
Yes, he is. He's the thing about less than flattering tights. There's been a lot of videos of Orange Cassidy's early career in Ring of Honor floating around on Twitter lately, and oh my word, there is footage of his attire which was less than flattering at the time, because he was still obviously working things out. If I can find it, this was before he was Fire Ant as well. Fire Ant was better. I'll find you a picture of him as you're talking next time, and also I will share so you can go, oh, that's intriguing. Yeah, I will do.
I do enjoy people's form of fashion moments because it's
It is. I mean, this entire show, there is an overwhelming amount of trash bag pants that is so mid-2000s indie wrestling everywhere on planet Earth. Everyone was wearing those trousers. Jody Fleisch springs instantly to mind. This was a fashion trend like Zumbas in the 80s and early 90s. It was like all wrestlers were Zumbas because the Road Warriors owned the company. They got them cheap. But the trash bag pants era is kind of went from about 2003 all the way up to about 2012. It was a mainstay of Shikara shows too from the early days of Shikara. But yes. Anywho, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this match too. It was a nice way to kind of like, especially you're always looking about how they introduce themselves, because obviously on bigger shows you're going to get an audience that isn't always. You're going to get your diehards, but you're going to get people that just come to a wrestling show, and it's nice to see how they set things up. Because every company does it slightly differently, and I like that. I like watching it. You can tell a lot from an opening match as well about how the company's going to work, what it's going to be like, and so yeah, it was very, very cool. Next up was more high-flying action, because this list of wrestlers is all high flyers for a couple. Tsuchikata J, Flying Kid Ichikara, Teikyu Fuke, and Ultima Dragon defeated Bad Force, Condor, Hideyoshi, Masamune, and Keimu in 11 minutes and 57 seconds. There was, as you can imagine, I do love Osaka Pro just because all of their evil factions have the most evil name you can think of. Bad Force. That's easy to understand. I know who the people wearing black hats are in this match. They're called Bad Force. You can't possibly go wrong. They're not nice. I don't like them. Boo hiss. So I like that. I like the simple and easy to understand narrative of they're not nice people, and that was easy. And of course, Ultimo Dragon's on that side. He's a good guy, except that bit in WCW when he was with Sonny Ono. He's always a good guy, so it's all good. I like this wholesome fun for everybody, and ridiculous flying high spots as you'd imagine from that crew. So yes, what did you think of this?
So yeah, Bad Force have been the main heel guys, I think, for a year, and yeah, they definitely went through this phase of, I think, aping American wrestling and occasionally like getting the English words were always hilarious when they show up in Osaka Pro. So yes, Bad Force really, really nice and clear. So they've been around since 2006, led by Gaina. And actually, they started in the 2006 Tenazan, which is the major tournament that Osaka Pro runs every year and still runs. Highly recommend watching that because it has Fujita Junior Hayato in, and young, dangerous, wonderful. Highly, highly recommended. But they've kind of taken over as this male main heel group, and Osaka had a heel group at the same time. So they've had this weird period of having two heel groups, Vendaval and Bad Force. But Bad Force basically made themselves the more bad guys. So they are more dramatic, more obvious, very much, they are the guys who will come in and ruin stuff. They're not your kind of cheeky bad guys. They're just mean bullies. So yeah, they do a lot of that in this show. This was so funny now, being somebody who watches Dragon Gate and watches Ultimo. It's Ultimo doing exactly the same spots as he does now in Dragon Gate, except he actually flies. So now he just teases it. Just exactly the same movements, exactly the same rhythm of stuff, but he just doesn't jump. And it's fascinating actually getting to see him jump. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It was like, oh, that's what it's supposed to happen. I like this partly because, it's a flight mode monetization tag. Togai in this period has no sense of personal safety.
I mean, wrestlers in general, but yes.
Yeah. He was chosen for the dojo partly because apparently he looked the most stupid of the tryouts, as in he would just be quite willing to throw himself around.
Okay.
And kind of do whatever it took. And he definitely had this kind of period in his life. He did eventually get, I think, slightly safer. I would say not until he moved to Noah, and maybe had spent like 2 years headbutting people in Noah. In fact, maybe it was after the headbutting of Takashi Segura that he slightly started to calm down a little bit. But yeah, the high flying Atsushi Kotoge is not something I think if you've seen his work in Noah, you'll have seen quite as much of, and it's worth going back, I think, and getting a sense of what this guy was like back then, because he was a very different kind of wrestler.
Yeah, absolutely. I found a picture of Orange Cassidy. If you go to the chat, you'll see Orange Cassidy in 2009. This is from Ring of Honor HD Net.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
He was about to wrestle Eddie Kingston wearing that.
Oh, why did anybody think that was a good idea?
I don't. HD Net had a lot of money and not much clue. So it's like, yeah. Do you consider like getting dressed? I think is the issue. I don't know what's going on there. It's for those of you. Obviously I can't show you. This is a radio. This is great radio. Is us describing pictures. It's Orange Cassidy. He's not got to the slick back, short back and sides. He's still got a kind of long, greasy grunge look going on, with a pair of bright green tights. I think they could be described as, good lord, they are green tights, with orange kick pads. In the classic case of course you're wearing kick pads, you don't kick anybody, because he was not kicking people at the time. And he looks like he needs a good dinner.
I am trying to think of anything that is this color. Like, it's the kind of colors that if your sports team pitched them, like there would be outrage in the streets.
It's it's the kind of things they would burn in Denver. It's I've seen race cars this color, but not for 2 or 3 decades, and that livery did not last long. It's the kind of if you've been on it's the kind of color when you've been sponsored by an obscure cigarette company that you end up having to wear on your car.
Yeah.
Because they have tons of money but no style, and are obviously
Yeah.
trying to stand out in their cancer stick way, and that's what
It's a
orange is
serious
for.
abuse of the color wheel.
It is, especially green and orange, which is arresting,
Yeah.
to say the least. Perhaps one should have consulted other things. And the disdain with which Eddie looks at him is far too. I've sent you a picture of Eddie's look at him. I'll go back a little bit. We're getting sidetracked here in the usual segues. But I will give you. Oh yeah, that's. I've just got to get a clean shot of that. Where is it? There we go.
Side chat.
It's what we do here. It's mainly talk about hair and clothing. We don't really talk about wrestling that much at all. But this is a classic Eddie Kingston. Oh my God, man! This sums the whole situation up, and you could use this for any situation. I think that would make you question people's sanity.
That's amazing.
There is a strong
Yeah.
case made for Eddie Kingston being the greatest professional wrestler alive today, and it's mainly because just the way he looks at people.
That is
His matches are great. The resilient, yeah, everything is the whole package. But it's just the facial expressions Eddie can come up with that no one
Yeah.
else can. Of just, oh good God, what are we doing now?
There's an element of "Are you okay?" in that.
Yeah, it's just like, you're in trouble at home, son. But yeah, Eddie's awesome. Anyway, we move back onto this particular show we should be talking about. We're going to get sideways again. Oh, we're going to get sideways here, aren't we? Zeus defeats Jinsei Shinzaki in 15 minutes and 8 seconds. Now, Jinsei Shinzaki doesn't look any different now, 17 years later, than he did then. And this is 5 years after the biggest period of his career in Japan in Badass Translate trading, and it's 12 years after his WWE run. We're now talking 33 years since his WWE run. He doesn't look any different, and he hasn't had any plastic surgery. It's just healthy living and yoga.
It's incredible. I mean, to be fair, Zeus looks pretty similar.
Yes, he does.
But it's not anywhere near the degree.
No, I mean, it's really hard to maintain Zeus's lack of body fat at any level for any length of time.
Yeah.
And he's incredibly fit now. But Zaki's just like on another level of I don't get it. Like what are they feeding them in Sendai that make out men that look like this?
Mm-hmm. I mean, then you got Sasuke, who clearly isn't on the diet. So.
No. It's just I don't know what, just absolutely phenomenal. And it's like it's been a couple of years since I see him, but he follows the Troopany Show on Twitter because his yoga company follows us on Twitter. Occasionally, I get updates of his yoga classes, and there'll be a yoga class occurring in Tokyo this weekend at so and so.
Amazing.
Yeah, so if you want to go do what must be some fairly strenuous yoga to a body that looks like that, then please go and report back to me. I'm not going to do that. I have not got knee joints left anymore. So
I don't know. The results do kind of speak for themselves.
They do. I perhaps should, do these things. However, good Lord. But this match was I found it really intriguing because Shinzaki didn't really get ahead. He was really giving in a lot of this match to Zeus. And Rosalie is the rising star and has messages later on this card. But yeah, clearly what they're trying to do is get the younger man over, and Shinzaki kind of uses all his familiarities to do that. Like he misses the things that would end the match, and therefore doesn't really lose. And in one of those wonderful things of like, I lost cleanly, but I've not lost anything. He still hasn't taken my finisher. He still hasn't taken the big setup moves. I've looked after myself, made him look amazing. Let's earn more money, which is what you want
Yeah.
as a wrestler. It's a really well put together match from that perspective. If you're a Shinzaki fan, I don't think you'd enjoy it as much because you miss all of the Shinzaki. However, if you're a wrestling fan, this is a joy. Just the master at work. And I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed it.
I think it's, I don't know, like I felt like it was something to appreciate, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it as a match.
I think,
Because
it's
there's
because
more
of it's getting somebody somewhere. This is the payoff for this is in 6 months' time. It's not today. If that makes sense. Yeah. And this is but
Yeah.
it goes back to you like saying this isn't the most complete Osaka card ever, but it's leading to a thing that gets to a thing.
Yeah.
And is representative of the time. And I think it shows you how well they were thinking ahead about making these young guys the next big thing. And yeah, and I think Zeus looks phenomenal. He doesn't look like any other Japanese wrestler of his era. Like even there are bigger wrestlers than him that don't look this good, of this particular time. So it's really cool. I enjoyed it from that point of view. But you're right, it's not a 5-star classic, but it's as a wrestling match concerned. If you take like the original concept of what a 5-star match is, it's actually a 5-star match because it does the thing it's supposed to do exceptionally well.
It's interesting because this was Zeus was a member of Bad Force, so he come out to Osaka Pro, very large man, broke a frying pan in half. That was his debut, and he does not look like anybody else. He does not kind of seem like anybody else. But Zeus was also a party boy. Like he was known as kind of a real party boy, and that was kind of his thing. It's like, I'll do whatever's fun, and it's fun to go around and be a big man and beat people up with Bad Force, and that was what he did for quite a while. And it hadn't been until the previous Tenazan where he'd kind of gone like, actually, maybe I just want to win off my own back and try being a wrestler. He kind of got this idea, and Shinzaki had been part of that. Shinzaki essentially was part of his journey to stepping away from Bad Force and was the guy who ultimately said, look, maybe you seem like you have something here. Maybe you want to try and make something of yourself. And so Zeus asked for this singles match, and is kind of on this journey to try and make something of himself as a wrestler. Now, ultimately, he goes and does that for about a year, and then goes off and does boxing. Does spectacularly badly at it. Well, he had one match, and then goes back to wrestling. But he says himself about this period as he wasn't really taking it that seriously. He's certainly not the Zeus you see in All Japan later. It wasn't until people kept telling him, actually you could be like a real serious like top level wrestler, that he started to take it seriously. It was just something he could do. And he liked the bodybuilding stuff. He liked kind of the performance element, but it wasn't that he loved, he wasn't one of those guys who loved wrestling so much that this is what he's always wanted to do.
Yeah, I think I think we get a lot more of that now because of like the Performance Center is a classic example of you get guys who aren't necessarily in love with pro wrestling, being pro wrestlers, which you always did, actually. Like, Gus Schonenberg, who was the first non-shooter to be world heavyweight champion, was a football player. He didn't love pro wrestling. He could earn a lot of money doing it. They had to he wrestled Ed Lewis a lot because Ed was a shooter. And therefore, if anybody challenged Gus in a bar, his job was to stand between Gus and the guy challenging him in a bar. Gus spent a lot of lonely nights inside, not wanting to have a fight with anyone. Because obviously, back in those days, legitimacy was everything. So, but it was Ed made him look like $1 million because that was Ed's job, right? That was, you know, and
Yes.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
intriguing to me. Those guys are always intriguing to me because it is like a lot of them are massively successful. Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody were football players first. They didn't really, you know, they got into wrestling not because they loved pro wrestling, but it's something they could make a living at, or exceptionally good at it because they got it straight away. And not all of them do. It's intriguing. Like Bruce is kind of half got it. He knew what he needed to do, but he wasn't like fully all in on it until someone said, "Hey, you're actually really good."
Yeah. You know, now he's running a wrestling company because he loves it that much. You know, it is his life and what he really cares about. But he had a complicated, you know, family situation around that time. He, you know, like I said, he was a party boy. Like one of his Shoe Pro interviews around this time, he just goes and gets a tattoo during the interview, like a Japanese, you know, promotion wrestling, you know, coverage, and he's just going to go get a tattoo, and then he takes them to look at some motorbikes and lifts them up. You know, it's all. He's an incredibly kind of silly character, but
actually the ideal professional wrestling person, but just didn't realize. Yeah,
absolutely. He just needed a moment. I do actually for this match want to talk about somebody else who's in the ring. I want to talk about the referee. And there's a pretty serious reason for that. This is the referee there is Ted Tanabe. This is the anniversary of his death. He died very sadly of a heart attack just after leaving the ring on 14th of June 2009, the day after Misawa died. They were the same age. And, you know, obviously big shock, but I think a lot of people we don't talk about referees that much.
Yeah.
And they can make so much difference. And Tanabe was known for being the best at ignoring heel work. he did become a heel referee at one point. Like he started his career in Japan Women's. He went to Michinoku Pro. He was all over. He was very much kind of a journeyman referee, but he's also really honestly like one of the greats, and I think people don't necessarily recognize or hear about him too. And I think it's sometimes worth just kind of going like, actually, these guys make a huge amount of difference to how we experience pro wrestling, and he made such a profound difference to Osaka Pro as a company in terms of his refereeing. Like he trained the guy who's been a referee now is Keigo Yoshino. So you'll see him from Sendai Girls, Freedoms as well. He's also very much a journeyman referee, and he was trained by Tanabe, and they still go annually to his grave and kind of pay respect. But he's then also been part of training little referee Kensuke, who's current Osaka Pro referee, best comedy timing. And, you know, it's this kind of history of passing on this stuff that I think, really means something. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to that guy.
I think I completely agree with you. We talk a lot, me and Marcus talk a lot about Tommy, the Marigold referee, because she's been around forever. Like she started in All Japan Women back in the early 80s in the Matsumoto Josh Girls era, and then ref for she was really close with Higasona Gaia, so she went to Gaia and then ref for Gaia, and obviously then ref for Oz Academy when Gaia closed down, and she ref for JWP. She basically was the house referee for everyone who wasn't AJW for a while, and she now is still like massively influential and refs for Marigold and a couple of the other Joshi companies as well. And yeah, I think it's that connection, isn't it? Because like the indie wrestling world of the early 90s, because obviously Ed also did a lot of FMW matches as well. So he was connected with all of them because of all of those companies. There's only so much personnel around, and you know, indie wrestling in Japan was still only 4 or 5 companies really. So he was doing a lot of work in the 90s that kind of built that reputation, and then, you know, through Michinoku Pro and then going to Osaka Pro, but doing stuff for FMW, you see him all over Japanese wrestling. And you're right, referees I give Marty Asami a hard time because, you know, that's kayfabe hard time. He's exceptionally good at what he does. Don't let anyone hear me say that. He, they're massively important to how Japanese wrestling runs, and more people don't see that. It's like New Japan would not be the company it is now without Takeru Hattori. It just wouldn't, because he was the only guy in the office who could speak English and lived in New York, and he had all of these connections that no one else had, and he made New Japan the company it was. The same with Red Shoes. Red Shoes worked for everybody before he got to New Japan. I was watching the highlights of the Master Chono at Sushi Anita match the other day, and Red Shoes was the referee for that match, and he was still wrestling for War. Still refereeing for War at the time. He wasn't refereeing for New Japan, so you had an outsider coming in to wrestle a New Japan guy, so they got an independent referee. Also because Red Shoes was the only one who was willing to get blown up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do that. I'll be right. I'll be fine. But yeah, and it is like they do so much because they're not just referees, they're connections, they are people, they're talent scouts, everything. It's amazing how these guys and girls run the show, and we don't really know about it. We do from a physical in the ring point of view, but we don't necessarily from how everything else is going to go on. And it's like the WWE thing of not giving referees names annoys me, because it means there's so much character comes out of a referee, and how you get used to the cadences of a certain referee and how things are going to do, how things are going to work. And if you don't see them as these bastions of respect, then it means wrestling doesn't make any sense. We're supposed to listen to them as they're our representative in the ring, their sanity, right? So the way we're connected to a referee is really, really important. How many NWA World Heavyweight Championship matches did Tommy Young make amazing down the years? Just by being Tommy Young. All those Flair matches and Harley Race matches in the 80s and 70s and 80s were amazing. And a lot of it came down to the way Tommy Young refereed a match and made it look like a real sport. Because if it doesn't look like a real sport, it looks terrible. And, if you want to look at wrestling with bad refereeing, Bronco Lubitsch, who moved at the speed of a glacier in Dallas, will tell you how badly it can go off the rails quite quickly. And Bronco did some cool stuff, but he's just so slow and old. Anyway. But yes, I absolutely agree with you. Referees massively important to how we watch wrestling and understand professional wrestling, and he was very important. He was a great sad loss to the wrestling world because of the amount of connections and the amount of great work he did. And if you want to go see old Michinoku Pro matches, he is all over them and does an incredible job.
Yeah.
Anywho, let us move on. Yes. Where are we? Oh yeah. Good Lord.
The comedy interlude.
Yeah. Now we will have an aside. Akibono, yes, him. Oh,
Yeah.
black gentleman, former sumo grand champion, arguably the greatest sumo grand champion of all time, tagging with Kiyoshinobu Kamen, get it right, Super Dolphin, and they defeated Eba-san, Kenjiro Matsumoya, and Miracle Man in 10 minutes and 40 seconds. And for those of you who didn't see Akibono, it was actually really good. For a big man size, he could move, he had presence, and while he wasn't Ric Flair or anything, I thoroughly enjoyed his matches down the years. When I first got back into Japanese wrestling, one of the first matches I saw was Akibono, and it was for I can't remember who he was tagging with, but it's for the World Tag Championships in AJPW on a Pro Wrestling Love card, which was it was when Muto was still the boss at All Japan, and obviously that became kind of one of his branding, and it was All Japan and New Japan together for Baba's birthday, or the anniversary of his birthday, and that was the first time I saw him wrestle. I was like, he's good. He's all right. He's okay. For a big lad, he can move. But it didn't really matter because he was a massive star.
Yeah.
And just sold tickets like Flynn. Just by being there. because he was such a big star of that particular era, and pro wrestling was kind of his ideal place to be. He's sadly no longer with us. He had a heart attack in 2019, if I can remember correctly, and it wiped him out completely, sadly, and then passed away a few years later, which is really sad because he had such a large presence. Not just, I don't mean that sarcastically. He really genuinely had a large presence in Japanese zeitgeist, not just in pro wrestling and in sumo. But there you go. What's your thoughts on this one? Because it is just big dumb wrestling match, which we are very fond of here.
I have absolutely enjoyed Akebono matches as well, and totally echo. He does a lot for companies, for being a star, for wrestling. This wasn't it. Half the stuff that he can do, and unfortunately for me, I love Osaka Pro comedy matches, and a lot of this, I think, was waiting for the guys to do their bit.
Yeah.
And if you know what their bit is, to some extent, that's funny. But to be honest, it worked so much better in an audience of 100 than it did in this audience of people who mostly aren't there to see that, who mostly don't necessarily get it. And they are there to see the finish, which is Akebono squashing 3 men at once. And I think we were all there for that moment, but very little else.
This could have been 4 seconds and it would have been a lot more efficient.
Yeah, ultimately, I'm afraid this wasn't the biggest Osaka Pro comedy hit. This is not the match that I would recommend people.
No, it's there. It happens, and it's got some big dumb spots in it, like I said. And that's, if you like big dumb spots, that's where we're at, and that's good.
Yeah.
But if you don't like big dumb spots and you want something a bit more serious, you'd be much more impressed by the next match. Emichi Marufuji defeats Billy Ken Kid in 13 minutes and 15 seconds as things start to get a bit more serious, and a sporting motif begins to appear on this particular entertainment. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was really good. And it did have a feel of like big star coming to small company, but equally Billy Ken Kid wasn't a million miles behind either. He was very blown up at the end giving his promo, because obviously he'd worked incredibly hard. But Marufuji looked like the star he was at this particular time, and still is to an extent. He hasn't lost much of his aura, even if he's not as a complete a wrestler as he used to be. Though, having said that, from what I understand, he's getting a lot better. Again, he's kind of like seen what is it, 3rd or 5th golden age. I've improved things a lot from what I understand. I haven't watched enough now lately to give complete answers on that. You would know better than I do. What do you think of his current status before we start talking?
Yeah, I think that whole Maru Ken Mark II, the other Ken, has done wonders for him anyway. I think that particularly as a tag wrestler, but you also see moments in those matches where he's Marufuji. He has this habit, and has done, I'd say, for the last 3 years or so, of you don't need to innovate that. Like, I know that your thing is that you're the genius, but like, we didn't need it. So he keeps trying things. I think on a younger wrestler, that's charming. I think sometimes on older wrestlers, people don't love it. And that's a bit of a shame. But certainly in terms of as an entertainer, as a wrestler, for me, he hasn't really diminished in that. I know people look a lot at his kind of physical kind of capacities to be able to do certain things. That's about your expectations about what somebody physically can do. It's not necessarily a reasonable expectation. He's got to do this, he's got to do that. I think he's always been a very good wrestler. Unfortunately, not a very good wrestler in terms of common habit, resting. And I do think that has hampered him at times, not just now in his career, but even as a young wrestler, he's not very good at not being there, as many wrestlers are.
Yeah, I think the thing you get in more in Japanese wrestling of being scared for your sport. And I don't think you realize actually. No, you're one of the biggest and most important generational wrestlers of your era. You should probably be able to take a month off and it'll be fine. You don't have to do every tour. You'll be okay.
Yeah.
But equally, I can see his point. But it's like changes as good as rest. It's the cornet thing. I don't watch him very often, but how can I miss you if you never go away? He's not far off that. So yeah. But what did you think of this match? Because this match was really good, I thought.
Yeah, I think this is really fun, and it did exactly what it was. Again, does a good example of doing exactly what it's supposed to do. There's no particular reason why Marufuji was here. This is Billie King Kid's return match. So he was injured back in October. He had, I think it was his arm, I think ulna. And he'd just come off a really good set of matches for the Fukumen World League, the Mass World League, and had potentially one of the best matches on that, was getting this kind of attention outside of Osaka Pro, like Billie King Kid is absolutely brilliant, and then injury. And it really kind of struck him at a time in his career where I think he was feeling like he was on the up. So he wanted to come back to a big name. And Marufuji said yes, which is good, because I think one of the things I like about this match is Marufuji is known as an innovator, but people don't necessarily talk about Billie Ken Kid. So many people use Billie Ken Kid's moves all across Japanese wrestling. He is, there's so much that he does that is recognizable and you will see from other places. And this is like a nice example of some of those kind of bits. He also looks great. This gear, the gold and silver gear, which kind of shimmers in the light, it just incredible energy from him. Billie Ken Kid now in his 50s, can still do this. He walks to the ring. It's like kind of not quite he's nowhere near a kind of Muto lean, but he, there's a little bit of tension in the knees. Gets in the ring and the man's moving just like he does in this match. It's insane.
There's I did steer a story once from Alex Shane, who used to run Wrestle Talk TV, who did say like he booked Kobayashi Misawa on a show in London back when FWA did big shows, and he said, I swear to God, that it took 20 minutes of them hitting each other before they got moving properly. It took, they would walk to the ring so slowly and gingerly and then knock 7 bells out of one another, and they'd be fine. They got moving then and it was all okay. And it was like, yeah, it's not healthy, but yeah. And I think that's the same thing with Kurt Angle as well. When he went to TNA, apparently, just like the oldest looking man you've ever seen in your life walked into the dressing room, and as soon as he got his singlet on, fine, perfect, ready to go. What are we doing?
Yeah,
ready to fly. And I think it's not healthy, but equally, I think it's a wrestler thing, isn't it? Of like, got to perform. Yeah. Go through the curtain, you're fine. Yeah. The George Styles story. We wrestled Ric Flair one night on one Saturday morning on WCW's Saturday Night Main Event. So they did the tapings on a Saturday morning. And Dustin rang up Rick, so we need you to do a match. And he was like, I'm only wrestling George South. I'll be there in half an hour. And he gets there, and Rick's like, got dark glasses on. Is like, hair's a mess. Just stumbles into the building, puts his gear on, swicks his hair back, walks out the dressing room. George, what are we doing? Hey, because he's Rick. Clearly had a night on the town, or several towns the night before, being Ric Flair styling and profiling. But, hell time, let's go. I'm wrestle motivated. George was his favorite squash guy to wrestle because he knew he'd have a good wrestling match. So we did 20 minutes for a squash match. So yeah, that's but it is like, it's part of the mindset, and it's just, well, like we said, it's not healthy, but equally, it's just what you don't stop them, can you? The grown adults, theoretically, they are pro wrestlers.
Yeah, and they know their business. He's not wrong. He goes out. He is absolutely as entertaining, and he's also achieving the stuff he wants to. Like, certainly Billy Ken Kid now. Like, he's responsible for generations now of great wrestlers. So Ryo Tanaka, who's about to break the Brave Gate defense record. I believe he will. At Dragon Gate. Absolutely exceptional wrestler. He's involved in training some of the younger guys in Osaka as well. So he's made a heck of a mark. And I don't think everybody knows about him, but he is one of the best junior wrestlers he was one of the best junior wrestlers at that point in time as well. There's a reason why Marufuji was quite happy to face him. What Marufuji said, he said he gave him the toughest finisher he had as a mark of respect. And actually, they didn't go through many, near falls. It was a case of, I'm going to finish you off.
Yeah.
But he didn't go light.
No.
And that was nice. I think there could have been, if circumstances were different, a lot more of some stuff between those guys. But
it's about placement, isn't it? Right moves at right time, and it was good. We move on to the semi-main event, which was Bad Force defeating Asian Cougar and Tsubasa 19 minutes and 59 seconds in an excellent tag team match. Osaka Pro Tag Team Championships. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This had some mad stuff in it. And I liked it. As a tag team match, it was really, really good. It was kind of like semi-main event's a really difficult spot to be in. And because you can't steal the show. You're not allowed to. And there are great semi-main events that did steal the show. We recently talked a lot about Akira Hokuto and Shinobu Kandori, which wasn't the main event of Dream Slam 1. The main event was Manami Toyota and Toshi Yamada versus Combat Toyota and Megumi Kudo. So imagine going on after watching these two murder each other for half an hour. We're finishing the show, are we? Oh, excellent. That's very nice of you. There's 13,000 people that have just watched Assault. We'll have a nice little wrestling match now and try and catch this crowd whilst they're so emotionally drained they could, they're going to need therapy for the next 6 months. So you can't do that too often because things go wrong. But I think they struck a lovely balance of the big moves, a really well told story, and half an hour's loads of time to be able to really get the intricacies of what you're trying to do across. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a roller coaster ride in my book. What did you think of this?
So there are moments of this where I'm like, okay, it's not the best example of an Osaka Pro championship, tag championship, or I think of Zero and Gaina, but it's it is thoroughly fun, as you say. Kuga bringing his ladder and chairs. I mean, like the stuff that man does with a chair is insane and not okay. Like I do not recommend anybody do some of the things that he does. He's recently come out of hospital again, but he's doing a lot better than he was. But again, a huge legend, and I think you can see some of the reasons why in this match. Not necessarily because his wrestling is maybe the most finessed, but again, he's a guy who's invented lots and lots of moves that other people now use. He's a guy who stands out for the way that he wrestles, and I think this is a really nice kind of look at Cougar if you haven't seen Cougar before. I also really like this. Tsubasa and Cougar is called Mucha Lucha, and they were a great team. They've done some great stuff. And Zero and Gaino, again, they're one of my favorite kind of tag teams from Osaka Pro. Up or Zero is he was pretty much the favorite wrestler of almost everybody, all of the young guys in Osaka now. When they're asked what their favorite wrestler was, is very often Zero, because he's mouthy, he's fast, he's flashy, and he's a bad guy, but he's also the guy who's running his mouth. So he's the guy you want to be. I don't love his mask, but it is quite scary and intimidating. So he's just a really, really cool guy. So it's a nice showcase, I think, of them. And yeah, particularly how crazy Cougar is.
Yes, we had a turn though after the match, didn't we?
Yes, and this is why I like people to watch this. And I will start by saying Atsushi Kotoge has never done anything wrong in his life ever.
Yes.
However,
he's a perfect angel.
He is perfect.
It's like I'm talking to Sarah.
Makes the correct decisions, but I think most people don't realize that he had a period as a heel, and this is his very short-lived heel period, because I think it's Zero gets on the mic and says we have a new Bad Force member, and everybody's like, what? And then out of nowhere, Katoge leaps from the corner and smacks. Oh God, I can't even remember which one of Mitch Lucha is in the face, and just completely kind of takes it out. And the thing is, Katoge at this point, I mean, there were kids, women screaming his name. He was a huge fan favorite, but he was also seen as like the slightly goofy, sweet boy. People did not see this coming at all. It had actually been telegraphed a little bit because Katoge and Harada had challenged for this championship back in January on the kind of the New Year's show. They had lost after a really good their first title challenge, really good first title challenge, and Katoge had been the only one who shook hands after the match. And that then led to all this trouble. And he joins Bad Force, and he sits in the middle of all of them, kneeling down while they all pet him on the head like a puppy. But this is I love this period of Katoge, and we don't have all that much footage of it. But basically, he spent 3 months, bleached hair, looking like a proper thug. Carrying around a chair, just attacking everybody, and he had the best time. He just seems so happy and overjoyed throughout this period, because ultimately, leading up until this, he was, he had been Harada's debut opponent, beat him handily for several months after that, and yet was being surpassed by him on a very regular basis. And he had lost the 2007 rookie tournament in the final to Harada. It just kept happening, and it wasn't that he hated the guy. It was just, they were a tag team together and had been for about 6 months. Hadn't necessarily been a huge choice of his. They had lost in the one match that they did have, although to fair, it's Katoge, they did lose, and I think he just needed to do something that was very much him, and was him striking out his own, and Bad Force was a chance to do that. And he had a great time, and he looks hilarious during this period. Had a really fun period. Ultimately, Bad Force split up in May, so he didn't get to do this for very long. But heel Katoge was a thing. And though in later years, Harada is often the one that steps away from Katoge and breaks up their team, Katoge did it first.
Yeah. There you go. You just reminded me of something I heard this week. Have you heard of Letterkenny? Do you watch the show Letterkenny? Or seen the show Letterkenny?
I am aware of said show.
So Michelle Milot plays Kate in Letterkenny, and Wayne, who's the main character, that's her sister. She has a podcast called Spare Parts about the show with another cast member. And she was saying, I saw a clip from the podcast, and she was saying, how when she grew up, she was really kind of shy, conservative kind of girl who didn't really, wear particularly outgoing outfits and stuff. And she was kind of always jealous of the alpha girls who would, wear the sexy stuff. And then she gets cast in this, and she's the line in the line in the show is Wayne saying, "Put some clothes on, Kate," which Kate will always be like, "Not my forte, bro." And so she would always wear revealing outfits, and she said it was the best time because it wasn't me that was wearing the bikini to sunbathe in the backyard. It was Kate, not Michelle. That was fine. I didn't have to do it, so I could give myself permission to go and do all of these things that I would never do in a million years because I can't do that. But I got to live my teenage fantasy of being the girl that wore the heels and the nice dress because they can, and I got to be the baddie, as it were, in that sense. And she said it was fantastic, and I lived every minute of it, except when she had to wear a bikini for a scene and it was 4 degrees because they were shooting in Canada.
Jeez.
It was like a scene that they had to get a scene done, and they were supposed to be sunbathing outside, and it was a sunny day, so they had to get it done. So they're in shorts and bikini tops, and it's 4 degrees, but it's sunny.
Oh, that sounds.
Yeah, trouble with being an actor, right? You don't always end up having to do things that you want to do. So like, yeah. So apparently she was on the phone with the writing team. Don't write any more scenes like that. And when we're on our shooting schedule, be sensible. But yeah. But yeah, it does always kind of like makes me smile when you see people who have like, when they just take to being a heel so well, especially early in their career. It's just like, yes, you're having the fun because you've got license to do what you like. It's okay. You're supposed to be booed. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm really surprised nobody has ever seen like in Noah. They never really saw this potential in him, and I think he was and has been certainly behind the scenes a very reliable kind of guy. But honestly, bleached hair, chair carrying Katoga was such a vibe, and I think it is a shame we haven't had a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's kind of like when watching Owen Hart turn heel was always kind of like kind of heartbreaking because he was always a babyface forever, but equally like he was having so much fun. I'm glad he got to have that run because it was like you listen to what Brett said afterwards, and it was like that WWE run for him was such a grind up until that point because he was always Brett's little brother, and then when he turned heel, he was like he could let loose and be like the things he wanted to. But prior to that, he was literally the ambassador for pro wrestling everywhere he went. He was like, he would do the babyface promo with the kids, and I remember watching him on a French TV show wrestling in a tent somewhere in the south of France because that's where wrestling is in France. And he did a promo like about saying how much he loved Le Catch, and speaking of as much French as someone from Calgary can manage. And putting promos in as much in broken French and English, and I got these kids to cheer along with him, and it's like he's so good at just being the baby face and being like the ultimate good guy because that's what he was in Calgary, right? That's where they needed him to be in Stampede. He have to carry the Hart legacy and all of those things. So when he got to be a heel, he got to be a bad guy. It was amazing to watch.
I think it's a good sign for a company as well, to some extent, if you can afford to put that guy in a position where actually he's getting booed. You're probably relatively secure. You've probably got somebody else you can rely on, and you've got an audience that understands it enough. And I think that's a really good kind of place. Whereas, Kadoga did have a heel period in Noah, but he was in Stinger. It didn't really fit, and it was all about his deep hidden bitterness, and it's not quite the same fun.
Everyone in Stinger had deep hidden bitterness. That was kind of the point.
Well, that's why it wasn't a good fit. As far as I mean, it got some great matches with Harada out of it, don't get me wrong. So never change it. But I don't think that's him. I think he's the sneaky, go behind you with a chair guy.
Yeah. Much happier place to be. So let us go to the final match and plug in for some personality disorder issues. Diego Mask defeated Black Buffalo 20 minutes and 38 seconds. Sorry, Tiger's Mask. Got that right. Tiger's Mask defeats Black Buffalo in 20 minutes and 38 seconds. So Black Buffalo, much like Tiger's Mask, was based on a local baseball team. So it is intriguing to me that I've not seen much of I've seen an awful lot of Tiger's Mask, but I've not seen an awful lot of Black Buffalo. So it was like, oh, this is going to be intriguing. And I wondered if, because obviously he's in baseball game, like, I'm connecting the dots of what Osaka Pro's like and what kind of characters they like, and then it made all make perfect sense. And then look up Wikipedia pages and start researching. So, this is close to. So you have two characters based on baseball teams, which is intriguing. And they've built up such a vibrant clash that they're having a mask versus mask match for the championship, the singles championship, the Osaka Pro Wrestling Championship. So this is everything going on with it, and this is kind of as Osaka Pro as it possibly can be, at least from looking at it from an outsider who's just coming to it and doing the research around the characters and what I know already. It's kind of like this is Osaka Pro at its most Osaka Pro, I feel. Or am I wrong?
No, this is one of the ones where I'm like, this this is kind of what the company is about, and it's not necessarily what people might expect because they might think of the comedy space first, which is fair. But these big singles main events are also a thing in modern Osaka Pro that I think catches people off guard of like, genuinely, if I don't have a main event where the men are sobbing afterwards, I kind of feel like, like this is the level of emotion that I am expecting from my kind of singles clashes. And yeah, I don't know. I think that might have scarred me for many reasons, but in wrestling generally, there are a number of Osaka Pro main events like this that I can point to modern day and then where it's heavy emotion, heavy hitting, a lot of aftermath, a lot of story, but also a lot going on in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, this was exceptionally high quality wrestling. Let's start there. You know, the match goes on for 20 minutes and 38 seconds. There's lots of story. There's lots of development. The crowd's into it. I think that's the major thing is like, even if you're not an Osaka Pro fan, you kind of want to be into it because you're listening to the crowd and they're into what's going on. It feels like a big match because of all that press presence. We were joking about the cameras earlier, but it always makes it feel like a sporting event. That's the cool thing about letting camera people, I should say, to ringside, because majority of camera people now are women. When New Japan let the cameras down to ringside, it's always female photographers, which I find really cool. So yeah, it feels like a big match because it's a big match and it's one of the biggest matches of its era. You put nearly 7,000 people in a building, you're doing well. You're doing the right thing. People came to see something special, and they delivered with high quality technical wrestling. And I thoroughly enjoyed it from a pure wrestling point of view. What did you think?
For me, it gets significantly better once Tiger's Mask starts to get the upper hand, because actually Buffalo goes in really hard, really early, and you know it's a big match. It has big match feel, which means that the first 10 minutes are not the fastest of kind of engagements in the first place. He's trying to wear down Tiger's Mask, but you're also pretty certain that nobody's losing their mask in the first 5 minutes of a match. It's just not happening. So it's not that kind of suspense feel, but yeah. Buffalo is incredibly, again, another one of these guys who just doesn't get enough attention because he's an incredible wrestler, like genuinely really, really top tier. And you've got Tiger's Mask, who of this era, Tiger's Mask was absolutely a comedy character. He used to come out and do a baseball slide. He comes out to the big entrance baseball music. And he used to, wear the full kind of baseball gear kind of costume, and he's not that in this era. He started to be able to be a wrestler who is based on this kind of comedy background, but he isn't kind of held back by that. And that, I think, he created some of that legacy in Osaka Pro, because I think they initially had a kind of comedy characters and not comedy characters. And actually, he's the guy who's been able to transcend all of that. And actually, a lot of people he's trained, Takeya Kida, have been able to transcend some of that. But then you've also got Buffalo. Buffalo is just a heel. He's always been a heel. And that's not necessarily how he fights in this.
No.
There's a huge amount of like obvious respect, and the stakes, you can really feel, I think, how important this is becoming for them over the course of the match. And that's what I like about it. It is that big mixed feel where it kind of builds up to like, oh shit, no, somebody's actually really going to lose their mask. This is now getting quite serious and quite scary. But Buffalo had been away for a period. Going into this match, what we know is that Buffalo had been sidelined due to injury. We know he'd kind of broken his contract in the previous year and disappeared off to Mexico. He was in AAA for at least one match, and then had kind of come back. And he'd come back and then had ended up kind of being the mastermind of Bad Force. He wasn't the leader, but he was kind of in a prime position of Bad Force, and very much then that put him opposed to Tiger's Mask, who's one of the lead good guys in the company, and particularly Billy King Kid was injured is absolutely the lead guy in the company. So it was kind of inevitable that these guys were going to be your main event. And they had been building to it for months and months and months. It hadn't been till November where Tigers had just like recklessly shouted out, like, put your mask on the line then, if this matters so much to you. Yeah, all right then. And that had been a big shock because they'd just not really done anything like that before. And you get to this, incredible match. And Tigers, the finish to this is a modified type suplex, which then last Osaka Pro champion then modified some more. So it's a little bit of legacy. And we'll get into what happens after the match, because I think that is a lot of the story. But it's still a really, even on its own, I think is a really solid main event. I don't think it is the best Hurricane main event ever. I think that might be the 2010 one, which was Dick Togo. But it's always stayed with me.
Yeah, I can see why. It's an emotional match. It's not just the even coming to it cold. And I mean, I get it because of the metadata I have in my head of how bet matches are supposed to work, and this works exceptionally well as a bet match. That's the number one rule is there's got to be a roller coaster ride. You're right. No one's losing their mask in the first 5 minutes. You've got to go on a journey in the match, which they did, to feel the emotions of what's going to happen afterwards, because the match doesn't end with the final bell. Like how you react to this and how you, it's in minor kind of things elsewhere, like Okada and Keita Kiyomiya at the New Japan Noah show, which did a Wrestle Kingdom in Yokohama, if I remember correctly. Like, it wasn't a bet match, but Kiyomiya bet on himself, right? It's like Okada and Tanahashi versus Kiyomiya and Muto. He'd always wanted this singles match, and he'd bet on himself, and he loses in a spectacular fashion. But it's all down to how he comes back from that. The aftermath of the match is the important thing. How you bounce back from losing in this dream match, and that's what he parlayed into his run for that year. So with the bet match, it's always what's happening afterwards that's the thing you're building up to. And it was like, I kept an eye on time, and we got to this card runs in. Obviously, it's edited, but the card runs at like 1 hour for the undercard. And then it's fairly brisk with the semi-main event, which I misread earlier. It's 90 minutes long, not 29 minutes long. 90 minutes long. So you have like 40 minutes to tell this story at the end of the show, and they don't cut any of it. You see the whole thing. And the post-match is so important as to what's going to happen next with both wrestlers. I know what's going to happen with both wrestlers. I don't speak Japanese. I can pick out words, but I watch those promos and I know exactly what's going to happen next. And then I confirmed it when I looked it up and looked it up to see what happened next. I'll let you explain because you'll do a better job than I will. But it becomes how you tell those stories. And one of the things I love about professional wrestling, because I can watch Lucha and understand it, even though I don't speak Spanish, and I can watch Puro and understand it, even though I don't speak Japanese, because wrestling has an international language that even promos that are incredibly emotional, complex, and detailed, I don't need to understand it. I just need to understand the emotions that are being portrayed. And that connects you to what's going on with that wrestler's brain. And those are the emotions that you look for, right? That's the thing that's trying to push you into being a wrestling fan. And the thing is, it's matches like this that really have the effect. Like watching Push Girls, like Dump Masamoto and Chigaso Nagayo hair versus hair is great. Don't get me wrong, but it's a maniac shaving the head of the girl next door. And that's a different kind of, she wants to cut her hair, right? Whereas if you watch, and it's the same thing with, I think it's Bull. I think there was another one, but I can't remember. It was someone else. But the most important one is Manami Toyo and Toshi Yamada, because that tells the story of dojo sisters, rivals, future tag team partners, going to become the greatest tag team of all time. But their hair versus hair match in '92 sets their career forward not because of the match. The match is fantastic. It's what happens after the match and how Toyota reacts to it, how Yamada reacts to it, that make that whole thing the most important event in Japanese women's wrestling. The next 5 years, because that sets the whole tone of the company for the next 5 years. And I can see this being the same thing. This is two wrestlers who are heel and babyface, but it's not that far away. It's not a whole bunch far away. It's not Dump Matsumoto and Chigusa Nagayo who hate each other. It's two wrestlers that are on different wavelengths. So the wavelengths come a lot closer together towards the end. Would you like to explain what happened?
So we get to the post-match, and obviously what has to happen is that Buffalo has to lose his mask.
Mhm.
And as is traditional, the person who beat him is supposed to take off the mask. So you get the chair in the middle of the ring, and you get initially Bad Force come in, and they are trying to, take Buffalo away. They don't want this to happen to their guy. And Buffalo completely pushes them away. It's like, no, what are you doing, guys? Like, I've got to go through this. And it seems like he's very much like prepared. This is a stakes for him. And he starts undoing his mask himself, gets Tigers to kind of come over, who also starts undoing it, but then kind of wanders off because he just can't really handle it. And he wanders off into the corner, and Buffalo goes over and slaps him in the face. He slaps him twice really hard. And then there's this like moment between the slaps where they're just staring at each other and you don't really know. Like, is this supposed to be happening? It's really uncomfortable. And then Buffalo ends up taking mask off himself. And absolutely sticks with the, masked wrestlers are all handsome underneath the mask. And it wasn't a hair versus hair match because he has the most beautiful hair and still always has. But yeah, in traditional fashion, you then have the kind of announcer come on and talk about who it is. So this is Keisuke Yamada, who was, I think it was in IWF for several years before this. He's very well known in that, but has been Buffalo for, at this point, several years. And he says, no, I don't need you to tell me, what my background and career is. And he starts doing it himself. And so Buffalo introduces himself, I've been wrestling for 15 years. And he starts talking about the fact that actually, despite having been wrestling for 15 years, there was a point where he didn't know if he was going to continue. So the previous year or so, he had stopped wrestling. There was talk about injury, but it's a little bit vague as to what the order of things was. But essentially, he said, I was depressed. And I was going into alcoholism because I couldn't wrestle. I couldn't wrestle as much as I wanted to. And wrestling was kind of his life. And he didn't know. He was talking about suicide. He really didn't know what his future was. And the company said, go away, get yourself sorted. You can come back. But he really felt like that in a way was kind of also being cut off. And the only person who came to see him was Tiger's Mask. And Tiger's Mask said, you love wrestling, let's practice wrestling. And he did go, he went away to Mexico after that, came back. And he said he came back to Osaka Pro partly because he wanted to repay Tiger's Mask, because the wrestling saved him, but Tiger's Mask was the person who saved him. And he had joined Bad Force partly because he wanted to repay somebody who essentially who he saw as saving his life. Now, obviously, some of this is real in here, and this is the really weird thing about this promo because it feels so real. And one of the things that makes it feel really real is Tiger's Mask looks deeply uncomfortable. This goes on for so much longer than it should do. I equally, I understand bits of Japanese. I can't hear this one very well. The audio isn't absolutely brilliant. It's not super clear to me what's being said, and I've had to kind of read around it a bit. But there's so much emotion going on. Buffalo is crying. He's like practically on his knees at some point, and then he's looking up, and then he's standing up, and then he's walking towards Tigers, and Tigers is walking back. And there's just this like man absolutely breaking down in front of people, sharing something that is part of wrestling, but part of his life, and is clearly part of the story, because to some extent you can't say, I came back to wrestling to join a heel group and face you. That's a little bit there's definitely some blurred lines there.
It's wrestling logic, and it's still wrestling logic.
Yeah, and it's such a bizarre thing, and certainly we know that the story about the alcoholism, and Buffalo has talked about this since, this is a very real thing that happened to him, and like visiting him.
Sorry to interrupt, but like the societal kind of impact of admitting you're an alcoholic in Japan in 2008.
Yeah,
that is a lot to deal with, because it's
Yeah.
not. It's a society that still doesn't, and even today doesn't really speak about those things out loud, if it can possibly help it.
Well, interestingly, on the other side, you then have Tiger's Mask, who on the build up to this had been a champion since the last Hurricane show in 2007, and who admitted in the build up to this, in the promotional stuff, and I think there was a press conference, said he himself was suffering from an anxiety disorder, and
Right.
that he was having to take medication before he got in the ring. And he'd always had the anxiety disorder, but actually that this was, now becoming a problem. And actually in the lead up to this, he had some kind of ceremonies to try and like rid himself of the bad stuff. And he was open about it, but the way that Tiger's Mask is open is very different to the way that Buffalo is being open in this ring. Or Yamada is being open in this ring. So you've got this man who's looking slightly visibly uncomfortable, but also this is his experience as well. He's glad he saved somebody's life, and he does come forward, and he's Tigers essentially says, life is hard. Life is, we've all got our own struggles, and it's important to be here. And he speaks a bit more than Tigers usually speaks, and it's obvious he's quite emotional in a way that, again, he isn't usually. Tigers isn't like shy about necessarily sharing stuff like the challenges that he had, but he tends to do it in quite a matter-of-fact way. This is very different to how Buffalo's just emoting all over the ring. But they just say, and thank you, and they hug, and then Buffalo leaves the ring, and this is all taken about 15 minutes, maybe. It feels like almost
I was thinking about, like, have I seen anything similar to this? I don't know. I wish we talked about the Yamada Toyota one, but I think the only one that really kind of like drills home to me was like LA Park versus Dr. Wagner Jr. At Triple Mania 5 or 6 years ago, which I guess was probably the biggest mask versus mask match AAA ever did. And it was when they started doing Triple Mania on YouTube, so they had a massive international audience who will, of course, all love LA Park because it's La Parka, the original La Parka, and it's Dr. Wagner Jr., who obviously has a big following, But this is just as emotional between two guys in their late 20s, early 30s, compared to that, which was two guys who were like in their 50s and have like this 35-year career of rivalry to hark back on. They had a bunch of stuff to make that match work, right? That was 3 decades in the making, that match. This match is barely half a decade in the making and means just as much and draws such a crowd. It's impressive work from a wrestling promotion point of view. Even before you get like the taboos they're breaking, to the stress on themselves that they're doing with what they're saying and the things that could be said about them. It's a lot going on here, and that's incredible, really.
I went back and I looked at so I follow a number of Osaka Pro fans, long-time Osaka Pro fans, and also many of them have blogs, which are like an incredibly useful resource. The guy, the announcer there, Shinjiro Miao, who is now the chairman of Osaka Pro, worked for the company since he was like a teenager, I think. But he kept a blog of like all of the matches and all of the storylines. So that's really, really kind of useful background. But they also talk about the fact that this was obviously a deeply emotional thing, and it hasn't got that mask history. Like, you know, you don't need to know that much about Mexican wrestling to get that, but there is a huge amount of family history in there. There's messy shit going on in the years of layers of stuff. We haven't got that here. The masks are important, but the story they're telling isn't necessarily about that. It's about being able to come clean and being able to be yourself to some extent in front of a massive crowd, and that being really well received by an audience who probably didn't know who these guys were when they walked in the building, which is absolutely incredible and absolutely insane. And it still gives me chills, and it is, again, it's one of those reasons I put this match on when I'm not feeling brilliant, because I don't understand how you could watch this and not get some kind of emotional reaction, even if it just makes you go, oh my god, and you know, press yourself to the wall and go, I can't get away from this level of emotion. I think it does something. But yeah, we have him, Buffalo walks up the long ramp, big emotional moment, gets attacked by his unit, who throw him out, obviously. I didn't want any of this.
Wussy stuff without feelings.
And crying in the ring, what is he doing? So they all leave, and then obviously Buffalo slowly kind of goes to slope off to the back, and Tigers shouts from the ring, you know, if you're really serious about how much you love wrestling, why don't we do it together? And Buffalo looks at him and then leaves. And ultimately, yes, they do end up tagging together. But there's also then this backstage interview, and I remember I was looking at this, and it looks like it's filmed in a bus station. Like, they are just two men crying in a bus station in a car, you know, giving their whole life stories. And Buffalo basically says, I don't know what happens now. I've no idea. Was not, you know, it's not that he wasn't planning on losing his mask, but it's kind of like, I don't know who I am now. Don't know what happens. But yes, him and Tigers typically do form a tag team, but only as heels. Because Buffalo has been a heel his whole life. But ultimately, when they do end up really becoming a serious team, it's not necessarily as the good guys.
Yeah, but that's the way things go, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because life doesn't always, like, you know, allow you to make lemonade out of lemons.
It is Buffalo. Black Buffalo is now the salesman for Osaka Pro. He is masked again, so the company kind of collapsed, and Buffalo ended up wrestling elsewhere. But if you go to an Osaka Pro show, he is the guy standing on the door, full mask. You can also see him up in the broadcasting booth again, full mask, which must be so hot and uncomfortable. But he seems like, you know, he's just somebody who really has a life with wrestling. That's really nice.
That is awesome. That is really, really cool. What do you think the overall effect on the company was from this card? Because obviously it's a massive milestone. How do you think where do you think it places? I'll start again. How did it set the company up moving forward? That's a better question to ask. Sorry.
So the thing that it really did, I think, is something for the young guys. So Zeus needed somewhere to go after this. He was wow, we didn't talk. Zeus came out and challenged Akabono. That was something that happened.
He did. We did not mention that. My apologies. I'm so poor of me.
Sorry, I've got like 3 pages of notes and I forgot it. So yeah, Zeus decides he's going to make a name for himself by climbing over the biggest guys possible. Bigger than Akebono. So he's really on a push. Katoge now has run off with the bad guys and is having his fun. Therefore, Harada and Tadasuke need to find their own way. And you get a unit set up called Blood and Guts, which ultimately Katoge ends up joining because Bad Force, the bad guys, do collapse because some of their members end up going off to Okinawa Pro. So the major thing, I think, is them. It's blood and guts. They don't last particularly long as a unit, especially because Yusun goes off and does boxing. But they set up Momonisation as a tag team, and they really do something for the company for the kind of 2009 to 2011 period, particularly. Sets up Harada eventually as the guy who becomes their ace kind of figure. But it's the kind of starting point of a lot of that. And obviously, I'm going to see things through a Momonisation lens because I would. But it is also really the continuation of Billy and Tigers and Buffalo are the guys who are going to take this company forward. And that's already kind of been established, I think, from really the previous year's Hurricane as well. But it's a continuation of this, that these are top guys. They are recognized as top guys, not just within Osaka, but outside of Osaka, and big crowds like this can show it. But it sets them up in a really kind of secure position. Ultimately, financial problems over the next few years do actually rear their head, and ultimately it is the reason why Osaka Pro ends up kind of collapsing by 2014. There is the slight exodus of Okinawa Pro. There is another exodus in 2012 and 2013. So it does slowly kind of leak away from this point. I wouldn't say it's the absolute high point. There's some, I said the 2010 Hurricane, I think the main event, and the Hurricanes are always big events for Osaka Pro. But it's not smooth sailing. It is hard work being a country in Japan, and especially a regional one.
Yeah, and especially that time period. Like we said, it's kind of a black hole of media at the time. I think they were probably going through the same. It's difficult because like Japanese wrestling and television haven't always worked hand in hand. Obviously, the Nippon TV had shares in All Japan, so they always guaranteed an hour of TV every week. Whereas New Japan, though they're owned by TV Asahi, never really had a regular television slot. They did, but they didn't, and they didn't. So wrestling kind of was absorbed in different ways, which is why you get FMW. It was perfectly reasonable for FMW to start a wrestling company with no TV and then fill 36,000 people in Kawasaki Baseball Stadium because they did it off VHS sales and laser discs. That's obviously the way you go. But it's just the way that Japanese wrestling companies worked. And always have worked, is like trying to find your audience is a different kind of discipline in Japan compared to everywhere else, because the obvious routes aren't always open to you. So it's amazing they got as far as they did in one sense. Well, equally understandable when that massive recession hit that they were going to be the ones that are kind of like most likely to have the most problems, especially when you're running a dojo and you have costs. And it goes back to a conversation me and Marcus had about why Japan produces so many great young wrestlers, and it's partly because of the dojo system, because you can afford to be a pro wrestler in Japan if you're good enough, because they'll pay you when you're 12 or when you're 16 years old, you will be a professional wrestler if you are good enough, because you just will. Whereas in the States, like there's Nick Wayne and Billy Starks, and that's it. Is another who are like under 22 and exceptional, just because of the way pro wrestling training works. Like it intrigues me, but equally I think Osaka Pro is like, that's costly. You've got to run it. You're putting that investment in your future, but equally, if you're not putting money in the gate, you can't invest in the future, because your future is trying to sell tickets for tomorrow. So yeah, it's an intriguing time. Sorry?
They maybe had 2 more classes after this in terms of the dojo guys who were probably, are still around in some form or another, but they had a relatively short-lived period, I think, of kind of dojos, because like you say, it's expensive. Not everybody is going to make it out of that, and you could have somebody with you for 2 years and you're a small indie, they could leave. You're not making a huge amount of money. Buffalo was roofing during the week. Like, your major stars were fixing people's roofs during the day.
That's it. And it's like Osaka Pro as well, kind of like one of the things I do remember I watched there's a Nippon TV used to do a YouTube series about life in Japan and culture in Japan. They obviously did an episode on pro wrestling. they were showing how Osaka Pro looks after its wrestlers, and they were giving them training opportunities for after their wrestling career ended. You know, there was the Osaka Pro Cafe that they ran, or the restaurant that they ran.
Yeah, they had a cafe on the ground floor in Dockbury. Yeah.
And they also they would go and visit old age pensioners' houses and try and integrate social care into the wrestling, which is really cool, but also expensive to do.
Yeah. And they still do that now. They had a show a couple of days ago, giving princess carries to old ladies, and I'm like, put me in that cabinet. I am ready.
I think we could end it on such a positive note. Osaka Pro, exceptional employers. So, yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me at Ruth is an Otter, just about all social media platforms, so Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. And I know there are many, many more. I might be on them. I can't remember. But you can also find the website that I run, which is 60minutedraw.com. And we have some great articles there about Japanese wrestling and particularly storytelling. And it's also, if you are interested in Osaka Pro, where you can find my updates on previous shows, what is going on with their factions, and enjoying the modern Zeus era of Osaka Pro.
There you go. I'd strongly recommend you go look at that website. There's some killer stories on there by people that follow the show, and we respect very highly. Go have a look. You can find me at Sheriff Lone Star. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Mastodon, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm also on Instagram at Sheriff Lone Star TX. You can find the show True Penny Show on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. We will be back next week. Thank you so much for listening to us today. If you're on YouTube, would you mind liking and subscribing there? We have been increasing our subscription numbers. We appreciate it greatly. And if you like it, tell it other people. We'd like other people to listen to us. It'd be really good. Bye.